This isn't a museum. Kid, people like you don't belong here. Victor Langston's words cut through the air like glass shattering on marble. They were sharp, deliberate, and loud enough for every customer in the showroom to hear. His tone wasn't just dismissive. It carried that cold, poisonous certainty that came from years of deciding who was worthy and who wasn't. Jamal Harris stood there, a 16-year-old boy in a faded hoodie and worn jeans, clutching a folded brochure of a metallic blue McLaren 720S. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. Before I take you further into this story, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And if you believe respect should never depend on the color of your skin or the clothes you wear, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like so more people can hear stories like this. It was early afternoon in Atlanta's Buckhead district, the kind of place where the sidewalks gleam and glass towers mirror the sun like they're competing for attention. Inside Atlanta Elite Motors, the scent of polished leather mixed with the quiet hum of smooth jazz, the kind of showroom where million-dollar deals happened with a handshake and a pen stroke. Jamal had walked in alone, a little nervous but excited. His father's 50th birthday was coming up, and after years of saving from small projects and investments, Desmond had helped him start. Jamal wanted to surprise him with the one thing his father had always admired, but never bought for himself: a McLaren 720S. Jamal had seen the car online, memorized every curve, every engine spec. He had imagined the look on his father's face, that rare, quiet smile Desmond wore when something truly touched him. It wasn't just a gift. It was a way to say thank you for every lesson about humility, resilience, and never letting the world tell you who you are. But Jamal didn't get the chance to explain any of that. The moment Victor spotted him from across the floor, his expression hardened. Victor was the senior sales manager, always in a tailored navy suit, hair slicked back, with a practiced smile for customers he deemed real buyers. Today, that smile didn't even flicker. He strode over like he was already certain of the ending. "Can I help you?" he asked, though it didn't sound like an offer. It sounded like a challenge. "Yes," Jamal said, keeping his voice calm. "I'm here about the McLaren, the blue one." Victor blinked at him, then laughed, a quick, derisive sound that seemed to ripple across the room. "That's a $350,000 car," he said, emphasizing each syllable like Jamal might not understand. "You might want to check the used lot in Decatur. This place isn't for everyone." From an office nearby, Sophia Grant, the dealership's marketing director, looked up from her laptop. She was known for her obsession with keeping the dealership's image perfect, meaning exclusive, polished, and as far from ordinary as possible. When she saw Jamal standing there, she smirked, clearly enjoying Victor's performance. Clara Evans, a younger sales associate with just 2 years at the dealership, froze at her desk. She'd seen Victor turn people away before, but something about this felt worse, more deliberate. She rose halfway from her chair, intending to step in, but Victor shot her a glance that said, "Don't even think about it." Jamal held his ground. "I came to see it," he said again, his tone steady. He wasn't asking for permission. Victor's voice dropped, but the contempt in it was even sharper. "Listen, kid, we're not here for joyrides. These cars are for serious buyers, and judging by your presentation, I think you know what I mean." He gestured vaguely at Jamal's hoodie, at the scuffed sneakers that had seen more basketball courts than marble floors. The humiliation burned hot under Jamal's skin. Every instinct told him to snap back, to defend himself. But his father's voice echoed in his mind. "Never let someone else's ignorance decide your worth." He took a slow breath, then turned toward the door. Clara couldn't stop herself. "If you'd like, I can show you the—" "Clara," Victor snapped, cutting her off. "Don't waste your time." His eyes never left Jamal's as he added, "You have a good day now." The automatic glass doors slid open, and the warm Atlanta air hit Jamal's face. He walked out without another word, each step heavy but purposeful. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. But deep down, a promise was forming. They would remember this moment, and they would regret it. Across the showroom floor, Sophia leaned back in her chair, looking pleased. To her, this was just another day of protecting the brand. Victor adjusted his cufflinks and moved on to greet a man in a designer suit, his smile suddenly bright and warm. Clara sat back down, her hands trembling with frustration. She knew she'd just witnessed something wrong, not just bad business, but something uglier, and she wasn't sure she could let it go. Outside, Jamal unlocked his old Toyota Corolla, the car his father had insisted he keep as a reminder that value comes from the driver, not the machine. He sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, staring at the reflection of the dealership in the rearview mirror. The sting of Victor's words wasn't fading. It was crystallizing into something else. Resolve. On the drive home, the city blurred past, the towering glass of Buckhead giving way to quieter streets. Jamal thought about how easily Victor had decided who he was without knowing anything about him. He thought about the customers inside, some pretending not to notice, others smirking in quiet agreement. And he thought about his father, who had built a billion-dollar tech company from a tiny apartment, who had faced worse and still taught his son to lead with dignity. By the time Jamal pulled into their driveway, he knew he had to tell his father everything. Desmond Harris wasn't just a parent. He was a man whose calm could move mountains and whose silence was often louder than other men's shouting. And Jamal knew that once his father heard what had happened, Atlanta Elite Motors would never be the same. Inside the dealership, Victor poured himself another cup of coffee, convinced the matter was closed. But a storm was coming, one that would start with a conversation between father and son, spread across social media, and end with Victor standing face to face with the very boy he'd dismissed. And in that moment, the power balance would shift forever. Desmond Harris could read his son's mood before a single word was spoken. Jamal stepped into their Buckhead townhouse with shoulders set a little too straight, jaw clenched just enough to hide the hurt. Desmond put down the book he'd been reading, his gaze steady. "Talk to me," he said, voice low but commanding in that way only a father who's lived through storms can manage. Jamal hesitated, then told it all. Victor's cold eyes, the smirk on Sophia's face, the way Clara had tried to step in but been silenced. He recounted every word, especially the part that stung the most. "This isn't a museum. Kid, people like you don't belong here." Desmond listened without interrupting, hands folded, eyes fixed on his son. When Jamal finished, there was a long pause. Desmond didn't explode, didn't curse, didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he said, "They'll learn. Son, not through anger, through truth. And when they do, they'll wish they'd treated you differently." Jamal knew that tone. It was the same one Desmond had used when his company had been underestimated by corporate giants, only to crush them with innovation and integrity. Desmond wasn't a man of petty revenge, but he was a man who understood the weight of a lesson well taught. "We're going to handle this in a way that leaves no room for excuses," Desmond continued, "and you're going to be part of it." Meanwhile, across town, Clara Evans sat at her small apartment desk, staring at her phone. Her conscience was gnawing at her. She had worked at Atlanta Elite Motors long enough to know Victor's arrogance, but yesterday had crossed a line. She'd seen the way customers glanced at Jamal, some uncomfortable, some amused, none willing to speak up. Clara's hands shook as she opened Twitter. She wasn't one to seek attention, but she also couldn't let the moment vanish into silence. She typed carefully, omitting names but leaving enough detail for the truth to shine. Yesterday, I watched a young man walk into our dealership interested in a $350K McLaren. Our sales manager laughed at him, told him to try the used lot. Because of his clothes and skin color, he walked out without anger. But I've never been more ashamed of my workplace. She hit tweet before she could second-guess herself. At first, it got a few likes from friends. But within hours, it was everywhere. The hashtag Justice for Jamal appeared as people shared and retweeted. Outraged at the casual cruelty in her words, comments poured in from Atlanta locals, civil rights advocates, and even celebrities who had faced similar treatment. Some demanded the dealership issue an apology, others vowed never to buy there again. The momentum was building like a tidal wave. By that evening, local news stations were calling Atlanta Elite Motors for comment. Sophia Grant was the first to act. She prided herself on controlling the dealership's public image, and now her pristine exclusive brand was being ripped apart online. Sitting in her office, she scribbled down a plan. Step 1. Paint Victor as the victim of a misunderstanding. Step 2. Suggest that the boy had been aggressive or disruptive. Step 3. Frame the incident as an overreaction fueled by social media exaggeration. Victor, on the other hand, was almost blissfully unaware. He had no social media presence and rarely paid attention to anything beyond the dealership floor. When Sophia pulled him into her office to brief him, he brushed it off. "People get mad online every day," he said with a shrug. "It'll blow over." "It won't," Sophia replied sharply. "You don't understand how fast this is moving. If the kid's connected to someone important, we could be in real trouble." Victor smirked. "Someone important? Please. He drove an old Toyota, back in Buckhead." Desmond sat at his desk, scanning the rising tide of posts under the hashtag. He recognized Clara's courage immediately, even without her name attached. "She'll face heat for this," he murmured, more to himself than to Jamal. "People who speak up usually do." Jamal leaned over his shoulder, reading the flood of support from strangers. "They get it. Dad," he said quietly. "They know what he did was wrong." Desmond nodded. "That's good. But outrage is only half the job. Change comes when the people responsible are forced to confront themselves, and we're going to make sure they do." That night, Desmond made a series of calls. Not loud, not public, just enough to put the right pieces in motion. One was to Michael Thornton, the dealership's owner, who took the call with guarded politeness. Another was to Lena Brooks, the director of Horizon Hope, the nonprofit Desmond had founded to support underserved youth in Atlanta. "I might be sending you a few reluctant volunteers," he told her with a dry smile. Lena, who knew Desmond's style, only replied, "I'll be ready." By the time morning came, the hashtag had reached national trending status. Journalists were digging into the dealership's past, unearthing old Yelp reviews and customer stories about high-pressure tactics and condescending treatment. Some posts tagged high-profile athletes and entertainers who'd experienced similar situations there. The dealership's phone lines were jammed with calls, some from reporters, some from people pretending to be interested in cars just to berate the staff. Inside, Sophia's plan to spin the narrative was already fraying. Clara had quietly confirmed to a journalist that the boy's name was Jamal Harris. Though she didn't mention his father's identity, the reporter hadn't made the connection yet. But once they did, the storm would hit a whole new level. Victor, still refusing to believe the seriousness of it all, spent the morning trying to sell a Bentley to a hedge fund manager. But even that customer mentioned the Twitter thing, making Victor's smile tighten. By lunch, Sophia was pacing her office, her phone glued to her ear, trying to get a PR firm on board. Michael Thornton was furious, not because of the injustice, but because the scandal was killing sales. That afternoon, Desmond told Jamal to ride with him. They drove in silence for most of the trip, the hum of the road filling the space between them. When they passed through downtown and into Buckhead, Jamal realized they were headed toward the dealership. "What are we doing?" he asked. Desmond's gaze stayed on the road, making sure they remember who you are and who I am. Sophia was mid-sentence in a phone call when she looked out the showroom window and froze. A matte black Rolls-Royce Cullinan was pulling into the lot, a vehicle worth nearly $500,000. Even from inside, its presence commanded attention. The doors opened, and Desmond Harris stepped out, tailored charcoal suit catching the light, Jamal just behind him. Sophia's heart sank. She didn't know everything yet, but instinct told her this was about to get much worse. What Victor didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the next few minutes would mark the turning point. Not just for him, not just for the dealership, but for everyone watching online as the story unfolded. And when Desmond spoke, the tone of the entire scandal would change from outrage to reckoning. The purr of the Rolls-Royce Cullinan's engine faded into the air as Desmond Harris stepped onto the polished pavement outside Atlanta Elite Motors. The dealership's massive glass panels reflected the luxury SUV behind him like a silent declaration. This man belonged in their world, whether they liked it or not. Jamal walked beside his father, his chin lifted. No longer the boy humiliated yesterday, but the son of a man whose presence carried quiet power. Inside, the soft jazz and polite murmurs of wealthy customers faltered as heads turned. Victor Langston, spotting the suit, the watch, the unmistakable aura of a high-net-worth client, smoothed his tie and strode forward with a rehearsed smile. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Atlanta Elite Motors. I'm Victor Langston, Senior Sales Manager. How can we—" Desmond didn't let him finish. "I'm Desmond Harris," he said evenly, his voice cutting through the air like a perfectly honed blade. "And I'm here about my son, Jamal, the one you insulted yesterday." The words landed heavy, erasing the warmth from Victor's smile. Behind him, Sophia Grant stiffened in the doorway of her office, her eyes darting to the sales floor. Michael Thornton, the dealership's owner, appeared from the back, his face pale as he took in the scene. Victor's polished demeanor cracked. "I didn't know he was your son," he stammered, as if that somehow lessened the offense. Desmond's gaze hardened. "So, you'd treat any black kid that way? As long as he wasn't connected to someone you consider important?" The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. A couple in designer clothes shifted uncomfortably by the Bentley display. Clara Evans, standing near the reception desk, felt her heart race, not from fear this time, but from the satisfaction of seeing truth catch up to arrogance. Michael stepped forward, attempting damage control. "Mr. Harris, let's not escalate." "This isn't escalation," Desmond interrupted, his tone calm but unyielding. "This is accountability." His eyes shifted back to Victor. "You looked at my son and decided who he was without knowing a single thing about him. You judged him by his clothes, by his age, by his skin. You humiliated him in front of strangers. That's not just bad business. That's character." Sophia emerged from her office, her heels clicking on the showroom floor. "Mr. Harris, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "No," Desmond said, turning toward her. "There's no misunderstanding here. I read the words, I saw the post, and I know the truth." He gestured toward Jamal. "He came here to buy a car, not just for himself, but for me. A gift, a McLaren 720S, and instead of treating him with basic respect, you made him a spectacle." Victor's mouth opened, but Desmond kept speaking. "I'm not here for an apology. Words are cheap. I want something that costs you. I own Horizon Hope, a foundation that works with underprivileged youth in this city. You, Victor, and you, Michael, will volunteer there. Not once, not for a photo op, For as long as it takes for you to understand that people's value isn't measured by what they wear or what they drive. Michael's face reddened. You can't just... Yes, Desmond said quietly, but with the weight of a man used to making decisions that change the course of companies. I can. Because after what happened, you're not just dealing with me. You're dealing with a story that's already halfway across the country. You're dealing with customers you'll never see again unless you show them you're capable of change. The silence stretched. Sophia glanced toward the entrance, where a local news crew was setting up outside, tipped off by the social media storm. Through the glass, she could see the reporter holding a microphone, scanning for the right moment to come in. Desmond turned to Clara. You were the one who tried to help him, weren't you? Clara hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. You still work here? Desmond asked. For now, she replied carefully. You'll be the one to handle the McLaren sale when I'm ready to finalize it, Desmond said. Because integrity deserves to be rewarded. Clara's eyes widened, not just at the sale, but at the fact he'd publicly chosen her over the others. Victor's jaw tightened. Look, you will start at Horizon Hope tomorrow. Desmond cut in. You'll meet kids who've lived through more in 10 years than you have in your entire life. And if you're lucky, you'll leave there a better man than the one who stood here yesterday. Sophia crossed her arms. And if we refuse? Desmond's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then I'll make sure no one with the means to buy from you ever does again. That's not a threat. It's a guarantee. Michael looked at Sophia, then at Victor. His business mind was already doing the math. Lost sales, plummeting reputation, headlines that wouldn't go away. Fine, he said through clenched teeth. We'll do it. Desmond gave a single nod. Good. Then we'll see you at Horizon Hope. He turned to leave, Jamal following close behind. But just as they reached the door, he paused and looked back at Victor. One more thing. You might want to think about how many other people you've treated the same way, because not all of them have a father willing to walk back through that door. The automatic doors opened, letting in a rush of warm air and the hum of traffic. Desmond and Jamal stepped out into the sunlight, greeted immediately by the reporter outside. Cameras flashed, questions flew. Desmond said only, "Talk to my foundation. You'll see the truth there." Then they climbed back into the Rolls-Royce and pulled away, leaving the dealership in a state of uneasy quiet. Inside, Sophia retreated to her office, already dialing PR contacts, while Michael rubbed his forehead like a man trying to stop a migraine. Victor stood rooted to the spot, the weight of Desmond's words pressing harder now that the adrenaline was fading. Clara, still by the reception desk, allowed herself the smallest smile, for once. Victor had been forced to stand still and listen, and she had a feeling that was only the beginning. By that evening, footage of Desmond's confrontation was everywhere. Clips of him calling out Victor's bias and insisting on volunteer work at Horizon Hope trended alongside hashtag Justice for Jamal. Public opinion swelled in Desmond's favor, painting him not just as a billionaire father defending his son, but as a man using his influence for something bigger. And while Sophia scrambled to contain the damage, she couldn't stop what was coming next. Because tomorrow, Victor Langston was going to walk into Horizon Hope for the first time, and nothing about the way he saw the world would ever be the same. The next morning, the shine of Atlanta Elite Motors felt far away as Victor Langston and Michael Thornton stood outside Horizon Hope in Atlanta's West End. The building was modest, red brick, a hand-painted sign, the faint sound of children's laughter drifting through the open windows. It was a world apart from the polished glass towers of Buckhead, and Victor's discomfort was written all over his face. He kept glancing at his watch, as if counting the minutes until he could leave. Michael adjusted his cufflinks, his own posture stiff, but his eyes at least showed some curiosity. They had arrived in silence. Both men knowing this was less about charity and more about penance. The front door opened, and Lena Brooks stepped out. She was a tall black woman in her late 40s, with warm brown eyes that could turn steel cold if you wasted her time. "Gentlemen," she said evenly, extending her hand first to Michael, then to Victor. "You're here to serve, not to be served. Follow me." Her voice carried a tone that brokered no argument. Victor didn't offer one, but the tightness in his jaw spoke volumes. Inside, Horizon Hope was alive. The smell of crayons and fresh-baked muffins filled the air. Walls were covered in colorful murals, painted by the kids themselves, depicting dreams of becoming doctors, astronauts, musicians. Children of all ages moved through the space, some playing board games, others working on homework at long tables. The atmosphere was warm, buzzing with energy. Victor, however, scanned the room like a man forced into an alien environment. Lena handed them both volunteer aprons. "Today, you'll help with the after-school program, math tutoring, art projects, whatever's needed, and you'll stay until the last child goes home." Victor slipped his apron on reluctantly, muttering, "I sell cars, not babysit." Lena's eyes flicked to him. "Today, you're not a salesman. Today, you're a human being in a room full of other human beings. Try it." Michael gave a faint smirk, recognizing the rare moment of someone putting Victor in his place. It wasn't long before Victor found himself standing awkwardly near a table of boys, building a model rocket from recycled soda bottles. One of them, a wiry 10-year-old with bright eyes and a tattered backpack, looked up. "Why you so mad?" the boy asked bluntly. His name, Victor would soon learn, was Malik Jones. "I'm not mad," Victor replied curtly. "Yeah, you are," Malik said. "Not unkindly. You look like my uncle when his football team loses." The other kids laughed. Victor tried to brush it off, but Malik kept talking. He told him about the rocket, how they were going to launch it next week, how it might not fly high, but they'd try anyway. "You can help if you want." Malik offered. "I don't know anything about rockets," Victor said. "That's okay." Malik shrugged. "We can teach you." The simplicity of it, the lack of judgment, caught Victor off guard. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Meanwhile, in Buckhead, Sophia Grant sat in her office scrolling through her phone, the lines around her mouth deepening. Her attempt to control the story was slipping further from her grasp. The viral video of Desmond confronting Victor had now been picked up by national morning shows. News anchors replayed the moment Desmond asked, "So, you'd treat any black kid that way?" Sophia knew the damage to the dealership's image was deepening by the hour. Her solution? Shift the blame entirely onto Victor and make herself appear as the one trying to fix things. By mid-afternoon, she was on the phone with a friendly blogger, leaking a version of events that painted Victor as a rogue employee acting against the dealership's values. She even hinted that Desmond's confrontation had been scripted for social media clout. It was a dangerous move, but Sophia was betting on public doubt to turn the tide, back at Horizon Hope. Victor spent the next hour shuffling between activities. He fetched paintbrushes for the art room. Though he mostly stood to the side, he helped pass out snacks, still wearing the same expression he'd worn when selling luxury cars: detached, polite, transactional. Then Malik returned, holding a small notebook. "This was my dad's," he said, flipping through pages filled with messy sketches of mechanical parts and half-written poems. He was a mechanic, fixed cars for people who couldn't pay much, said it was about helping, not getting rich. Victor glanced at the pages, his eyes lingering on a rough drawing of a car engine. "He sounds like a good man." Victor said quietly, "He was." Malik replied, "He died when I was 8, but I still got his backpack, even when it's falling apart. I keep fixing it. Makes me feel like he's still around." Victor didn't know why his throat tightened at those words. Maybe it was because, for the first time in a long time, he was talking to someone who wasn't trying to sell him anything, impress him, or outdo him. Malik wasn't asking for approval. He was just sharing a piece of his life. Lena watched from across the room, her sharp eyes softening slightly. She'd seen this before. The slow cracking of walls people didn't even know they'd built. As the afternoon went on, Victor found himself less interested in his watch and more drawn into the kids' projects. He held the rocket steady while Malik taped the fins. He even joined a game of basketball in the small outdoor court, where Malik's quick passes caught him off guard and made him laugh. A real laugh. Not the polite sales chuckle he'd perfected over the years. But outside this small bubble of change, Sophia's scheme was beginning to unravel. Clara Evans, having caught wind of Sophia's leaked narrative, decided enough was enough. She used her growing social media following to post a detailed account of what she'd witnessed, naming Sophia's role in fostering the dealership's elitist culture. Screenshots of Sophia's internal emails, leaked by another disgruntled employee, began circulating online, showing her disdain for non-target clientele. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Boycotts grew. Customers canceled appointments, and even a few high-profile clients publicly announced they'd no longer do business with Atlanta Elite Motors. By the end of the day, Michael, who had spent his volunteer hours repairing shelves in Horizon Hope's supply closet, was starting to see the bigger picture. He pulled Victor aside as they were leaving. "If we don't change, we're finished," Michael said. "And I don't just mean the dealership." Victor didn't respond right away. He glanced back toward the building, where Malik stood in the doorway, waving his patched-up backpack in farewell. "Yeah," Victor said finally, his voice quieter than usual. "Maybe you're right." It was the first crack in a wall that had taken years to build. He didn't know it yet, but tomorrow, Malik's persistence and Sophia's crumbling lies would push him even further toward a choice that would define the rest of his life. By the 5th day at Horizon Hope, Victor Langston was no longer standing in the corner counting minutes. Something about the place, or maybe someone, had started to work its way under his skin. Malik Jones had a way of talking that stripped away all the polished armor Victor wore in the showroom. That morning, Malik was sitting at a table in the rec room, his small hands methodically taping a tear in the strap of his old backpack. Victor approached, curious despite himself. "That thing's falling apart," he said, trying to sound casual. Malik glanced up with a grin. "It was my dad's. Fixed it a bunch of times already. Keeps him close." The boy's voice carried no self-pity, only quiet pride. Victor looked at the frayed fabric, then back at Malik's determined expression, and felt a pinch in his chest he couldn't explain. While Victor was finding moments of connection in the West End, the storm outside Horizon Hope's brick walls was reaching hurricane strength. At Atlanta Elite Motors, Sophia Grant's carefully laid PR spin had collapsed in spectacular fashion. Her claim that the viral incident was a misunderstanding was publicly dismantled when Clara Evans went on record with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, giving a clear, detailed account of Victor's words and Sophia's role in maintaining the dealership's elitist culture. Clara's account was backed by leaked internal emails given to the press by another employee that showed Sophia mocking non-target clientele and instructing staff to avoid people who look like they can't afford the upholstery. The backlash was instant. Hashtags like Justice for Jamal and Boycott Elite Motors flooded social media. Celebrity car collectors posted that they'd cancel their orders. Local business groups publicly severed ties. Even a famous NBA player shared Clara's post, adding, "I've been treated like this too. Enough is enough. For the first time, the dealership's once loyal, wealthy clientele began to openly question its values. Back at Horizon Hope, Michael Thornton's usual guarded manner was softening as well. He had spent the morning helping repair a shelf in the art supply closet, and Lena Brooks had noticed he was no longer checking his phone every 5 minutes. But Victor, though changed from his first day, still had a foot in both worlds. He'd laugh with Malik during a game of horse on the small basketball court, but his mind would still wander to the chaos brewing at the dealership. That afternoon, Lena gathered the volunteers to help set up for the weekly community dinner. Victor found himself arranging folding chairs with Malik's help. "You any good at cooking?" Malik asked, holding a chair upside down. "Not really," Victor admitted. "I usually pay someone else to do it." Malik smirked. Figures. The teasing was light. But Victor felt the truth of it. He'd spent years building a life where every inconvenience was outsourced. And here was this kid, making him realize how detached he'd been from the simple act of showing up for others. Midway through the setup, Victor's phone buzzed with an urgent call from Sophia. He stepped outside to answer. Leaning against the brick wall, her voice was sharp, almost panicked. "We've lost 4 sales today. Michael's fleet contract is at risk, and Clara's out there making us look like monsters." Victor sighed. "Maybe because we have been acting like monsters." Sophia froze on the other end. "Don't start with me. We can still flip this if you get in front of a camera and say you were misunderstood. Cry a little. Talk about how you were under stress." "No," Victor said, surprising himself. "I'm not lying to fix this. Not anymore. You realize if you take that stance, you're done in this business?" She shot back. "Maybe," he said, glancing through the window where Malik was now helping a little girl glue glitter stars to a cardboard rocket. "But maybe being done with this business isn't the worst thing." Sophia hung up without another word. Inside, the community dinner was beginning. Families lined up for plates of baked chicken, green beans, and cornbread. Victor found himself serving alongside Malik, handing out plates with a "here you go" that actually felt genuine. At one point, Malik looked up at him and said, "You're different from when you first got here." Victor chuckled. "You think so?" "Yeah. First day. You looked like you wanted to run away. Now you look like you might stay." The words hit Victor harder than expected. He realized Malik wasn't just talking about Horizon Hope. He was talking about the kind of person Victor was choosing to be, back in Buckhead. Sophia made her next move. She called Clara into the dealership under the guise of a meeting to resolve misunderstandings. But as soon as Clara arrived, Sophia told her she was being terminated for breach of confidentiality. The firing was immediate, cold, and calculated. Sophia thought removing Clara would kill the story. Instead, it poured gasoline on the fire. Clara took to Twitter within the hour, posting, "I was just fired for telling the truth. Make no mistake, this is what retaliation looks like." The post racked up hundreds of thousands of likes in hours. Victor heard about the firing later that evening when Michael arrived at Horizon Hope to pick him up. "Did you know Sophia let Clara go?" Michael asked. Victor's eyes darkened. "She what?" Michael nodded. "It's everywhere. People are saying we're retaliating against whistleblowers. Our name is poison right now." Victor didn't respond immediately. He thought about Clara's kindness to Jamal in the showroom, how she had tried to step in, knowing it could hurt her standing at work, and now she'd paid the price for it. "We can't let that stand," Victor said finally. "Not if we have any chance of turning this around." That night, Victor sat alone in his car outside his apartment, the sounds of the city buzzing faintly in the background. He thought about the showroom, about Sophia's smug certainty, about Malik's stubborn hope. He remembered the look in Jamal's eyes when he'd stood beside his father in the dealership. Calm, dignified, but unshakably firm. for the first time. Victor wondered if the best way to save himself wasn't to cling to the old ways, but to burn them down and start fresh. The choice was becoming clear. The dealership's problems were no longer just Desmond Harris's fight. They were Victor's too. And the next step would either cement his change or prove it was all just a passing act. 2 weeks after that first humiliating encounter at Atlanta Elite Motors, the balance of power in the story shifted again. Desmond Harris returned to the dealership, this time not to confront, but to complete what he had started. He stepped out of the matte black Rolls-Royce Cullinan with the same composed authority that had silenced the showroom before, Jamal walking proudly at his side. But there was one important difference. Today, Desmond wasn't here to reward arrogance, he was here to reward integrity. Inside, Clara Evans, now a reluctant public figure thanks to her viral posts, stood near the sales desk, unsure if she even still had a job after Sophia's attempted firing. Desmond walked straight to her. "You were the only one in this building who acted with dignity that day," he said, his voice carrying enough weight for everyone within earshot to hear. "If I'm going to buy that McLaren, it's going to be from you, and only you." Clara's eyes widened, both in gratitude and disbelief. She glanced at Michael Thornton, who said nothing, knowing Desmond's word carried more influence than any corporate protocol. The showroom went still as Desmond made his purchase, a metallic blue McLaren 720S, the same one Jamal had come for in the first place. But there was a condition attached, and he made it clear before signing the final paperwork. "You'll get a partial fleet contract from one of my companies." Desmond said to Michael, "Not the full account. I want to see change first. Real change. And Clara here will lead your new anti-discrimination training." Michael nodded stiffly, aware this was more than a sale. It was a public test of their commitment to transformation. Later that evening, Horizon Hope's annual gala was held at the Peachtree Hotel, a golden-lit ballroom filled with community leaders, donors, and volunteers. Desmond and Jamal arrived together, the McLaren safely parked outside as a silent symbol of both justice and restraint. Victor Langston was there too, but he wasn't in a suit as pristine as before. His attire was formal but understated, his posture less rigid, his expression less guarded. Weeks of working at Horizon Hope had worn away the veneer of elitism he'd once clung to. As the evening progressed, Lena Brooks took the stage to thank the volunteers. Then she paused, looking out into the crowd. "Before I close, I want to acknowledge someone who's had a complicated journey to get here," she said with a knowing smile. "Victor, would you come up?" Murmurs swept the room as Victor stood, clearly unprepared. He walked to the podium slowly, glancing briefly at Desmond, who gave a small nod. Victor took a breath, gripping the edges of the podium. "I want to start by saying I was wrong," he began, his voice quieter than the confident sales pitch he once used to charm wealthy clients. "I was wrong to judge someone by their appearance, wrong to think my title or my showroom made me better than anyone else. When Jamal walked into Atlanta Elite Motors, I saw a kid who didn't fit the picture I had in my head. What I didn't see was his character, his purpose, or his heart. And that's on me." His voice faltered for just a second. "Horizon Hope showed me that value isn't measured in dollars, and respect isn't a privilege, it's a basic right, across the room." Jamal listened intently. The public nature of Victor's words mattered, not because Jamal needed validation, but because others watching might see themselves in the moment. When Victor finished, he stepped away from the podium and walked straight to Jamal. The two stood face to face, the air between them heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. "I'm sorry," Victor said simply. "Your strength showed me my flaws. I can't undo what I did, but I can make sure I don't do it again." Jamal nodded, his voice calm. Then make it count. Not just for me, but for every kid who walks into a place where they're told they don't belong. The audience, moved by the exchange, broke into applause. Even Michael, standing in the back, clapped, though whether it was for the sincerity of the moment or for the optics, no one could be sure. The mood of the evening was celebratory but grounded. Malik, beaming in a new jacket donated by one of the gala sponsors, darted around the room introducing Victor to other kids from Horizon Hope. "This is Mr. Langston," Malik would say proudly, as if Victor were now part of the family. And in some way, maybe he was. As for Sophia Grant, her downfall was swift. Her leaked emails had become the final nail in her professional coffin. Michael had no choice but to terminate her, citing irreparable damage to the dealership's reputation. She wasn't invited to the gala, nor was her absence mourned, outside of Atlanta Elite Motors. Whispers circulated that she might struggle to find work in the industry again, toward the end of the night. Desmond took the stage, his presence immediately commanding attention. "We've all seen how quickly the world can pass judgment," he began. "We've seen how easy it is to write someone off because of how they look, how they dress, or where they come from. But what we choose to do after we've been wrong, that's what defines us." His gaze swept the room, lingering on Victor. Change isn't just about apology, it's about action. And tonight, I've seen action. He then announced that Horizon Hope would be expanding its mentorship program, pairing business professionals with youth in underserved communities. "Victor will be leading our new career readiness initiative," Desmond added, prompting a mix of surprise and approval from the audience. Victor looked stunned, but also resolute. It was as if Desmond was giving him a chance not just to make amends, but to build something lasting out of his mistake. After the speeches, the room shifted into a softer mood. People mingled, music played, and laughter replaced the earlier tension. Jamal and Malik sat at a table, sharing dessert and talking about cars. Clara chatted with donors about her plans for dealership training. Victor stood near the back, watching it all, perhaps realizing for the first time that genuine respect felt better than any sales commission. Before leaving, Desmond approached Clara. "I meant what I said earlier," he told her. "You'll run that training, and if you ever want to leave the dealership, there's a place for you at Nexus Innovations." Clara smiled, the relief in her eyes unmistakable. The night closed on a quiet but powerful note. Jamal, standing with his father by the hotel's glass doors, glanced back at the room filled with people who had been part of this transformation, some reluctantly, some eagerly. "You think he'll stick with it?" Jamal asked. Desmond looked at Victor, now crouched down to listen to Malik explain the mechanics of his model rocket. "I think," Desmond said slowly, "that once you see the world through the eyes of someone you've underestimated, it's hard to go back." And with that, father and son stepped into the cool Atlanta night, knowing the work wasn't finished, but change had begun. Months later, Atlanta Elite Motors no longer looked, or felt, like the same place Jamal had walked into that day. The gleaming cars still sat under perfect showroom lighting. The leather still carried its rich scent. But something deeper had shifted. Gone was the silent, invisible barrier that separated acceptable customers from those judged unworthy at first glance. In its place was a culture that greeted everyone, from a man in a tailored suit to a teen in a hoodie, with the same respect. And at the heart of this change stood Victor Langston, the very man who had once humiliated Jamal Harris. He was no longer the polished, unapproachable salesman whose eyes skimmed people like price tags. Now, he was a mentor, both at the dealership and at Horizon Hope, running workshops on career readiness, personal presentation, and, most importantly, the value of treating every person with dignity, every Wednesday. Victor could be found in Horizon Hope's multi-purpose room, leading mock interview sessions with teenagers who had never even set foot inside a corporate office. Malik Jones was always there, sitting in the front row, notebook open, peppering Victor with questions that ranged from, "What do I say if I don't have work experience?" to "How do I know if I'm ready to run my own business?" Victor's answers were direct, but now they carried patience and warmth instead of condescension. He often stayed long after the sessions ended, helping Malik fine-tune his plans for the small lawn care business he wanted to start with his friends. Clara Evans had been promoted to Customer Relations Director at the dealership, a role Desmond Harris personally recommended her for. She used her position to ensure that the changes weren't just surface-level PR moves. Every new hire went through an orientation that included bias training, community engagement requirements, and, at Clara's insistence, a week volunteering at Horizon Hope. The results were undeniable. Sales climbed back up. But more importantly, the dealership's reputation transformed into one of inclusivity. Customers began posting positive experiences online, and the hashtag #JusticeForJamal evolved into Welcome to Elite, a sign of the dealership's turnaround. Michael Thornton, once reluctant to get involved, had partnered with Desmond to create a scholarship fund for local youth interested in automotive engineering. The first recipient was announced at a small ceremony inside Horizon Hope. A beaming Malik, holding a certificate and wearing a brand-new backpack. The gift came from Victor, who had handed it to him with the quiet words, "Your dad would be proud." Malik's hug was immediate and tight, the kind of moment that said more than speeches ever could. As for Sophia Grant, her name had become a cautionary tale in Atlanta's business circles. Unable to secure another high-profile position, she faded from the luxury sales scene entirely. Her absence was noted only as a reminder of what happened when arrogance outweighed accountability. Through it all, Jamal remained a constant presence in the dealership's story. He wasn't there to gloat or remind anyone of their past mistakes. Instead, he visited Horizon Hope regularly, mentoring younger boys, sharing his own story about the day he was told he didn't belong. He used it not as a tale of humiliation, but as proof that self-worth isn't determined by someone else's judgment. His calm confidence, much like his father's, inspired the kids to hold their heads high in spaces that weren't built for them. Yet, one late afternoon, Jamal stopped by the dealership with Desmond. They walked through the glass doors together, greeted warmly by every employee, including Victor. "Good to see you both," Victor said, and this time, there was no hint of performance in his smile. As they toured the showroom, Jamal noticed something new, a framed photo on the wall, showing Victor, Clara, Michael, Malik, and several other Horizon Hope kids standing together at a community car show. Below it, a plaque read, "Respect is not earned by wealth. It is given freely, to all." Desmond paused in front of the photo, reading the words out loud. "Looks like you've been busy," he said to Victor. "Trying to be." Victor replied, "Some lessons stick with you, whether you want them to or not." As Jamal looked around, he realized the transformation wasn't just in policies or public perception. It was in the people. The same floor where he'd once been told to leave was now a place where kids from Horizon Hope were invited to learn about cars, shake hands with executives, and dream bigger than they thought possible. And it all began with a moment of arrogance that met an immovable wall of quiet dignity. That night, as the sun set over Atlanta, Desmond, Jamal, and Malik stood outside the dealership, the glass panels reflecting the golden light. "Funny," Jamal said, "how something ugly can end up changing so much for the better." Desmond nodded, his gaze steady. "That's the thing about truth, son. When you face it, it changes you. And when you act on it, it changes the world around you." Atlanta Elite Motors would sell countless cars in the years to come, but its greatest legacy wouldn't be found in its sales records or luxury inventory. It would be in the way it had opened its doors. and its heart, to everyone, proving that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in compassion, respect, and the courage to grow. Thank you for watching this powerful story. If you believe everyone deserves respect, no matter their skin color or background, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to the channel so we can share more inspiring stories together. See you in the next video.